my name is Irene, and in this video, I am going to be introducing you to the different camera types that are contained within Sketchup and what are their different purposes. So let's get to it. Alright, so I'm going to continue working with this kitchen, living, dining setup that I used for my previous video, and we're going to be seeing camera types. So the idea behind camera types is that different camera types can help us in different scenarios, either while we are modeling or when it comes to presenting information. So first thing first, there is always a default camera type, and that is perspective. And the way that you can verify that is if you go on your camera menu, you're going to see that perspective is checked up by default. But then you're going to see that there's two more options. There's parallel projection and there is 2-point perspective. So first thing first, let's talk about what perspective is and what it does. So the whole point of a perspective view is that it is the most natural way that we humans perceive spaces as they are affected by depth, right? So basically the idea here is think close big, think far small, right? So like, for example, if I put my two thumbs, one thumb is going to look bigger than the other one, right? So that is what perspective is. And again, this is the default because this is the way that we humans perceive the world. So it is kind of like the most natural way of viewing a model, but it is not necessarily the best way to look at a model. So this is where my other two options are going to come in. So the first option is what we refer to as a parallel projection. So I'm going to set it up here, camera, and I'm going to switch to parallel projection. And you're going to see that immediately, these feel so weird, especially again, if you don't work a lot in the construction industry. So a parallel projection is also known as an isometric. And the idea here is that this is a view where there isn't a perspective distorting the geometry. In other words, you don't get the thing further, smaller, thing closer, bigger. Everything is exactly the dimension that it needs to be. And the purpose, like the main purpose of this camera position is to help basically annotate a 3D view. So I'm going to give you an example here. So let's say that I have this kitchen island here. You can barely see it, but it is there. So let's say that I want a cabinet maker to build this kitchen island, but for whatever reason, they're just like, look, we're friends, we know each other. Just send me a screenshot with some measurements. So you could, technically speaking, do that, or you could do this. So let's say that I'm going to go to my kitchen island. I'm going to hide the rest of my model. So I can go view, component edit, and then hide the rest of my model. And here you can see basically what's going on here. Because my view is isometric, parallel projection, I can basically see that this part here and this part here are the same size, and this guy here and this guy here are the same size. Basically, an isometric view maintains consistent dimensions, which means that if I would want to, I could, for example, come here and say, okay, I'm going to put a dimension here. That's not looking super hot. Like, we're going to talk about those later. But I could, for example, put another dimension here. Why is it looking so? It's whatever. And then I could put, for example, let's say I'm going to put another dimension here, and I'm going to pull this guy out. So the idea of an isometric view is that, technically speaking, you can annotate it because there is no perspective distorting distances and spaces and dimensions, okay? So that is one, or the main reason that we work with parallel projection, aka isometric. The other one is that basically this is how floor plans and elevations and basically all construction views are going to work. So let's say, for example, I'm going to turn off my top view elements, my ceiling and my lights, and I'm going to come here to a top view, and guess what? That looks a lot like a floor plan. Now, it is not a floor plan. For you to be able to create floor plans and interior elevations and all of that good stuff in SketchUp, you need one more tool that I'm going to be introducing you in a next video. But this does recreate the behavior of construction views. Because again, if you want to be able to annotate something, you need to be able to see it without perspective distorting dimensions, right? So once again, I could come here with my dimensions and I could say, like, for example, this space is going to be this much, this space is going to be this, this space is going to be this much, and so on and so forth. Continue adding my dimensions. Now, again, I'm going to say it right now. If you're like, wait, you haven't taught how to do dimensions, don't worry, there's a reason that I haven't. And spoilers, it's not like this. This is actually an awful way of doing it. But yeah, you can dimension in SketchUp. So these are the two main purposes of working with parallel projection. Number one, it is much easier to annotate, but it is also easier to view things. Say, for example, if I would want to move this table, I kind of like the position of the table, but if I would want to move the position of this table and rug, let me show you here. If I would be on a perspective, I'm going to switch back to my perspective. See how, yes, sure, I can can see the walls and I can see the room, and that can be helpful in a way. But then it also makes it hard to kind of like understand the positioning in general. Instead, if I go to my parallel projection again, you can perfectly see the distance between things. So again, this parallel projection is not just a presentation camera setup, it is also a setup that is going to make it much easier for you to work with certain elements, especially when it comes to placing objects in relationship to others, okay? So that is the first option. I'm going to switch back to my perspective. And then the other camera types, again, the perspective is the default. Parallel projection is going to be an isometric view where there is no perspective, there's no distortion. And the third one is going to be a two-point perspective. Now, to better understand how this guy works, I'm actually going to use my position camera or camera position. I always forget how to call it. And I'm going to say, okay, let's say that let's set up my view. And I think this is actually, I'm trying to like force it, but like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, now it looks awful. Great. So why am I saying that this looks awful? Because of what the two-point perspective is going to do. So if you have ever learned how to draw perspectives, you will be familiar with a two-point perspective. The idea of a two-point perspective is that you have a horizon line, you have 2 points, and basically from those 2 points, you're going to project lines, and that is going to allow you to draw that perspective. So one of the main characteristics of a two-point perspective is that your height lines, so basically the lines that denote height in your view, are perfectly vertical. And this is why I was like being careful setting up my camera, because I wanted you to see how messed up it is. So if you look here at this edge, see how my cabinet goes kind of like, ooh, it goes like in. And then you can also see it here with the trim of this like opening. You can see how it goes like this. So right now we are working in a perspective. That means that all angles of my model are being distorted, because that's the thing. Like, you have to understand that the two thumbs, thumb close, big, thumb far, small, doesn't work just in a horizontal. It also works in a vertical. That's why the top of a building looks so tiny compared with the base of the building. So if you are in just a regular perspective, all directions are getting distorted by the perspective. In a two-point perspective, height is not being distorted, and thus it is a perfectly straight line. So I'm going to come here to camera, and I'm going to switch to two-point perspective. Delicious. This looks great. One of the things that I really like about this is that when you set up your camera to a two-point perspective, you will notice that your cursor will automatically switch to pan. So see, if I press my left button in my mouse, I am panning. So this is important to understand. If you orbit or you look around, you will break the two-point perspective. So you're going to see, like, I'm going to press my wheel to orbit, and as soon, there you go. See how it jumped, and now my borders are messed up again. See how that guy's messed up? And if I zoom a little bit more, you can see, this guy's messed up again, because I orbited. So very, very important. When you switch to a two-point camera perspective, the only two movements that you can actually do are going to be pan and zoom. So see, I can zoom in and out. I would not recommend that you zoom out too much, because the thing is that when you are in a two-point perspective, Sketchup will not kick you out of the model, which may sound nice, except that you can see that you can really push that zoom out until you generate this like black hole experience, which is not very nice. This is all to say that you should try to avoid using the zoom tool once you are engaged with two-point perspective. Basically, you should try to put your camera to see as much as you want to see. So when you switch to the two-point perspective, you don't have to zoom in and out too much. And it's more going to be a matter of panning a little bit to choosing basically the focus of your camera. So you may be asking yourself, okay, so like, what is the point of the two-point perspective? Well, this is just the way that we professionally present spaces. If you go on Pinterest or in a, I don't know, like a design magazine, architectural digest, whatever you want, you're going to notice that in the real world, when spaces are photographed, they are usually two-point perspectives. Unless they're photographing something dramatic, like they're trying to capture the heights, like for example, a double height space, or maybe it's like a staircase that is like really interesting, and they're trying to create a dramatic effect. For the most part, architectural and interior design photography works with a two-point perspective. In fact, photographers will set up their cameras so like the height of the camera and the height of the point that they focus on is the same. This facilitates creating that two-point perspective, and then they will actually take their photographs into post-processing where they will straighten them up. So again, if you're curious, go check for architectural photography and start counting how many of them are actually two-point perspectives. So the idea here is that when you want to showcase your space, let's say that you want to capture like a very nice picture and you want to put that in a presentation, you want that to look professional, and 2-point perspective is the way to get that more professional appearance for your model. So as you can see, we have basically 3 different options depending on our needs. So perspective, the default, is just the most natural way of looking at the model. It's going to allow us to move around and orbit and model and work with everything that we are doing. Parallel projection is also very useful while you are modeling, but its main purpose is to allow us to annotate 3D objects through the isometric setup. And then finally, the 2-point perspective is going to be kind of like our presentation, like our final form for our 3D models when we want to show them to other parties. And with that, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, maybe you should consider subscribing and liking. Maybe give it a comment. I will do my best to try to answer. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very much for sticking through, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.